Welcome back, college fans, to another episode of Break the Huddle, your go-to source for all things college football. Today, we're going to be diving headfirst into one of the wildest coaching carousels in recent memory. That's right, the 2025 offseason has delivered some absolute shockers with legendary names and redemption stories shaping the future of the sport. I'm Nathan Johnston, here with my co-host, Brad Hopkins. It's time to break the huddle. Brad, so many stories going on in the offseason, but I think it's safe to say that this year's coaching carousel has been one of the biggest storylines that we've seen all year or for years in past. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. Let's start off with probably the biggest name in college football, and that's Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, obviously Hall of Fame coach in the NFL, first ballot Hall of Famer. I would be willing to bet on. And now he transitions to college. Now he has an opportunity to deep dive with his GM and with his NIL and portal and all that good stuff that comes with college. Let's start off with his influence on the game, his discipline, and his defensive prowess. Brad, I mean, what are your thoughts on Bill Belichick? First of all, coming to North Carolina, and how do you see him fitting into college football?
Nate, yeah, I will start off by saying this is one of my favorite episodes that we do. I love the coaching changes and everything, and we start off with just a really, really interesting one. We had Bill Belichick when the North Carolina job opened, of course, after Matt Brown announced that he was, retiring, and hats off to Matt Brown. What a great career at North Carolina, at Texas, and then back to North Carolina. But Coach Brown, thank you for the years that you gave us. Bill Belichick, to me, was a very weird hire, but it's intriguing. And I'm interested to see, what the spring game looks like at North Carolina. I think you're probably going to have maybe not a full capacity stadium, but pretty close to capacity. But
sure.
Nate, just focusing on this hire, Bill Belichick's never been in the college game, or it's if he has, it was very, very long time ago. You mentioned, and I think this is one of the most intriguing things for me, is he has chosen to go out and hire a GM to handle kind of all the recruiting side of things. Of course, if you're a Patriots fan, or if you're a North Carolina fan that has done some deep dive into his time in New England, he was the de facto GM. He made calls on draft picks, on who to sign, who to re-sign, who to let go. Now, he was not necessarily negotiating contracts,
Right.
but it was Bill Belichick's, he was the man in the building there. And so I think it's an interesting move. It's a move that we've heard other college coaches do to navigate the portal and NIL, but not to this extent. From what I understand, he's going to dabble in recruiting, but he's living up to that GM and that recruiting staff. So that's interesting. Nate, my big takeaway of that is, how does Bill Belichick look some parents in the room and say, no, I'm not recruiting your son, but I want your son to come play for me. And I think there's going to be a lot more details that come out about it. But that's interesting to me, just how he attacks the landscape of college football with the recruiting, and he's never done it before.
Yeah, and I think the translation between NFL and college has kind of diminished, right? In terms of, hey, players are getting paid now. Hey, there's a portal now. There's a lot of similarities, and you're actually seeing college coaches transition to the NFL because they get to do all the same things they're doing in college now with less time. Here, Bill Belichick stands, probably had an opportunity for at least, I'd say, 3 to 4 head coaching jobs in the NFL, decides to go to college. And I think that brings us to our first couple of points about Bill Belichick, and that's the challenges and concerns of him coaching in college. Starting off with recruiting. Will Bill Belichick be able to embrace NIL and the portal? And I think you kind of touched on it, but I don't think we've seen enough from him yet. He's just getting his feet wet. He obviously brings in the GM and Lombo, as I like to call him. He's his nickname, Lombo, who's a genius. What a great hire if you're going to hire a GM in college football. But Brad, I'll turn it over to you for this question is, the whole NIL and transfer portal and how it relates to North Carolina moving forward. Obviously, Bill Belichick, he can walk in a room and kind of turn some heads right away. It's like the Nick Saban effect. is it going to be possible for him to use NIL and to use the portal effectively in the right way to rebuild Carolina?
That's a great question. I will say, reading some stuff, North Carolina has got some resources. I think, this is no disrespect. I love to watch ACC football, but I think it's a friendly conference to come into. I mean, you've got your Clemson, you've got your Miami, you've got your SMU, but Bill Belichick in North Carolina is in an interesting spot. Nate, one of the curious things that I am interested in seeing is how does he choose to build this roster? We've seen it, and I'm gonna kind of put this into two categories. On this category, I'm gonna put, off the top of my head, I would put Kirby Smart, Dabo, maybe Nick Saban.
Sure.
These guys, I would say, and this is a very, very rough estimate. 75 to 80% of their rosters is high school players.
Yeah.
And then you've got, I'm going to put Dion probably could be in a category over here, but yeah, Dion, maybe Lane Kiffin to an extent, and I know I'm missing a couple others. They are, they're really heavy into the transfer portal. I mean,
Kirk Cinetti.
Kirk Cinetti. I've even, I believe Dion and, he signed in the middle teens of high school players, and the rest of it was transfer portal. So where does Bill Belichick land in these two categories? And how does his NFL mind come into play with this? I think that is going to be the really big question. Now, I will say, I think bottom line, you're going to have some guys from the state of North Carolina. They may be legacies. They may have dads play there. They're going to say, I'm going to go to North Carolina. Yeah. You're going to have some guys that, hey, this is a chance for me to get coached by all-time greatest. Like you said, absolutely. And I'm going to go to North Carolina. Does he take that approach? I'm interested. My initial thoughts, he's going to land somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I think he's going to definitely be heavily influenced with college, but I'm sorry, with high school players. But I think the portal is going to be. It's free agency. Sure. He's used to free agency, so that's going to be a very interesting thing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing that I look for at Bill Belichick transitioning to North Carolina is his ability to develop talent.
Yes.
I mean, I think that part of his game and his mind translates almost better to college than any other coach, because when you think about the New England Patriots and what he was able to do there, I mean, those guys were not top round draft picks. Very, very few were top round players. I mean, obviously he'd have the free agent of Randy Moss come in and help out the team, a few others. But when you look at the Tom Brady's, when you look at the Edelmans, all those guys, they were not top prospects coming into the NFL. And so I think you got to look at Bill Belichick coming into this situation thinking, okay, we may not be able to get 5 stars right away because we got to prove ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of these kids, not only do they want to play right away, they want a chance to win championships. Yeah. And you can say whatever you want from the NFL, but college is a whole new ball game. And the way things, the scheduling, the games, the flow of the games, it's completely different. So I'm intrigued personally to see, how does he develop the 3 stars? How does he develop the 4 stars? And granted, not every 5-star pans out to be what they're supposed to be, DJU being one of the biggest examples recently. So I'm curious to see when it comes to the developmental part, how he translates to North Carolina in terms of developing 3 stars and lower.
Nate, one other thing, and that's a great point, kind of along the same lines of development. One other thing I'm intrigued by is Bill Belichick in the college game. They have a very limited schedule that they're with these players. I mean, you take an NFL, they get in the building at 8 o'clock and they leave at 6, 7 o'clock at night. College, you don't have that. You're limited to how many hours you put in with the spring, how many hours you put in the summer, and then game week. That's a thing that I think he's going to be navigating as well. As okay, I've got a limited time with these guys, and I'm not. You made a great point. Your Edelmans, your Tom Brady's, your Wes Welkers. He developed some guys that were day 2, day 3 NFL draft guys. And now you say, okay, I've got even less time to develop some of these guys. That's going to be an interesting navigation from him.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about, the best case versus worst case scenarios. Best being their immediate contender. They have NFL caliber discipline, which we talked about, his development, attracts to top transfers. Mm-hmm. That's going to play a big part. Versus the worst, which is struggles with recruiting, culture fit issues, and short tenure. We know Bill Belichick comes into this UNC job much older than he did when he became the head coach of the Patriots. And you kind of touched on it too, going into the homes of these kids and telling these parents, hey, your son's going to play for me for the next 4 years. I wonder if that plays a part in it. We saw it kind of at Alabama with Nick Saban towards the end, right? Sometimes even with you mentioned with Deion Sanders, right? Are you going to take another job? Are you going to follow your sons? I think Bill Belichick's going to struggle with this part a little bit. I think it's going to be more worst case scenario than best case scenario. And look, I hope I'm wrong. I'm rooting for Bill. I want North Carolina to come back and be a contender in the ACC for now. We'll talk about maybe them transitioning to another conference. But yeah, bro, what are your thoughts on the best versus worst case scenarios for Bill?
I agree with your points. I mean, I think the biggest question mark for me is obviously, recruiting / NIL. I think you're going to see a good development from his players. But look, college is completely different. You touched on this in our intro. You're seeing a lot of college coaches move to the NFL, and it's position coaches going to position coaches because it's less hours. It's, they may enjoy recruiting, but they don't have to deal with recruiting. They get, they get their position groups drafted for them, and they simply have to coach them up. Bill's, I've hearing Kirby Smart talk, Kirby's sometimes, during the season, even all season, he's on 16, 17, 18-hour days. Can, Bill Belichick handle that kind of grind? That's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. I think my biggest takeaway that we have in our little handout, our notes here, is the tenure. If Bill Belichick goes and they go 9-3 or 10-2 at North Carolina next year, how does he turn down an NFL job call? And that's going to be very, very tense. I mean, we saw it this year. The Raiders were rumored, to be interviewing him, and there were some thoughts of, he hasn't, and we still don't know, has he signed that North Carolina contract or not? That to me is where I think negative recruiting is going to impact him. Schools going up against North Carolina saying, hey, Belichick's going to be gone in a year and a half or 2 years. And so that's going to be interesting. One final point before I turn it back over to you. Freddie Kitchens, his offensive coordinator, I'm very intrigued to see how he does. He's been in the program. He's been in the college game. He brings a little stability to that North Carolina staff. I'm interested to see how he does their calling plays for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, it's going to be a great season nonetheless for North Carolina fans. And we want to hear your reaction. Let us know what you think of Bill Belichick. Let us know what you think of this program moving forward for the Tar Heels. Program impacts, right? Just a quick couple mentions. We see Bill Belichick getting very involved with athletics as a whole. Mm-hmm. We see him sending free pizzas to fraternities before the Duke game. We see him turning the turf or the artificial turf field into grass. Yeah. So those may seem like small changes right now, but it's the little things that add up. We know that when you're coaching a college football program, it takes time and it takes discipline. Mm-hmm. And it's those mundane days where you don't really feel like doing anything that you have to do the most. And so I think if there's anyone fit for this job, it's Bill Belichick. Yeah. And I think he's going to surround himself with really great staff that know the college game, that know what it takes to develop to become an NFL player. And I think that's going to be their pitch to high school recruits. So we're going to see what happens. Let us know down in the comments what you think about North Carolina bringing in Bill Belichick as your next head coach. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And we'll see you next week. It's time to break the huddle.